Tell me, Winston, and remember, no lies. What are your true feelings towards Big Brother?
I hate him.
During the 1980s, films set in dystopian futures became a very popular subgenre with audiences. But unfortunately, most of these films only used the setting of a dystopia as a backdrop so they could tell an action-adventure story. The two biggest exceptions to this trend were Michael Radford's 1984 and Terry Gilliam's Brazil, two films that actually tried to show how their dystopian societies operated and how they would affect the individuals living in it. First published in 1949, George Orwell's 1984 became an instant success and set the standard for modern dystopian fiction. So much so that the term Orwellian has become a part of the English language. George Orwell was born Eric Arthur Blair in 1903, but went under the pen name George Orwell when he became an author. He was an open supporter of communism and the Soviet Union in his youth, but became disillusioned after his experience during the Spanish Civil War, where the Soviets not only fought against the fascists, but also competing communist parties. This act of betrayal, along with the rise of the brutal Stalin regime, became the main inspiration for 1984, where a failed socialist state becomes totalitarian and where propaganda and purges are used to control its citizens. The book was first adapted into a feature film in 1956, but like many genre films from the 50s, it suffered from the Hays Code and very melodramatic acting. Nearly 30 years later, the most faithful film adaptation of 1984 would be produced. John Hurt would play the lead character Winston, a member of the Outer Party who works as an editor at the Ministry of Truth. The Ministry of Truth is one of the 4 ministries that control the population of Oceania. The Ministry of Love is in charge of keeping people loyal to Big Brother. The Ministry of Peace is in charge of the war effort. The Ministry of Plenty in charge of food rationing. And the Ministry of Truth rewrites old historical documents and is responsible for creating newspeak.
It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. You won't have seen the dictionary, 10th edition yet, Smith? It's that thick. The 11th edition will be that thick.
Well, the revolution will be complete when the language is perfect.
The secret is to move from translation to direct thought to automatic response. No need for self-discipline. Language coming from here, not from here.
Excuse me for intruding, but what you're saying is that we should be rid of the last vestiges of Goldsteinism when the language has been cleaned. I couldn't be more in agreement with you, brother.
In my opinion, newspeak is Orwell's most brilliant concept in the novel. The best way to control the population is to control the language, or in the case of 1984, to destroy it. Big Brother's motivation for destroying language is to prevent any independent thought in Oceania. Newspeak creates a vocabulary that appeals not to one's intellect, but to one's emotions. Emotions that can be more easily controlled and manipulated by the state. This is only a personal observation, but I feel that America is dealing with the destruction of language similar to Newspeak. In my lifetime, reading comprehension, essay fundamentals, and especially penmanship have all been de-emphasized in schools. And at the same time, communicating using only 140 characters, abbreviations, and even emojis has increased in popularity. What we're doing to language is self-destructive, and if we don't change the way we debate and talk to each other, things are only going to get worse. Oceania's methods of social control are very typical for cult of personality states. Citizens are made to worship an infallible leader on a daily basis. They're given terrible food that gives them no nutrition or energy. They can only wear uniforms and are supposed to refer to each other as brother or comrade. And they're all made to live in a state of constant fear, whether from foreign nations like Eurasia or domestic saboteurs like Goldstein. Everything is set up to preserve the power of the dear leader, and anyone who disagrees with this is considered a traitor. Oceania was mainly inspired by the Soviet Union, but one key element that was taken from the Nazi regime was the Hitler Youth, and the idea that the family unit was an enemy of the state because people are instinctively more loyal to one's family than to their country. In Oceania, the only love you are allowed to feel is for Big Brother. This is what O'Brien is after when he is torturing Winston. His complete submission and loyalty. Winston bravely refuses, but O'Brien tries one last time to make him loyal to Big Brother, by using his greatest fear against him. One of the few original ideas in the film that was not in the book was the idea of connecting rats to Winston's emotions. As a boy, Winston briefly ran away from home, and when he returned, his mother and sister disappeared, and only rats remained. Winston connects rats with the fear of losing people that he loved. So when he finally submits, he is not only betraying Julia, he is also betraying the memory of his mother and sister. In the end, Winston has no more love to give to anyone, because they can all be so easily taken away. Now the only love he has left is to Big Brother, who will never leave him.
Do you wake from your finest fantasy only to return to your daily nightmare? Is your mother about to look younger than you do? Does the woman of your dreams,
I love you. In my dreams, I love you.
still have a few doubts? Then it's time to take a stand. To break out of your dull, humdrum life and into Brazil.
There are two major differences between Brazil and 1984. One is their tone, and the other is how their dystopias function. Brazil's tone was inspired by the writing of Franz Kafka, particularly his novel The Trial, where the main character, Joseph K., is tried for a crime where there are no accusers or evidence, and is advised to just plead guilty instead of devoting years of his life defending himself. Monty Python alum Terry Gilliam used this Kafkaesque point of view to make an absurdist film where a dystopian society was in complete disorder. Brazil's society is not controlled by a Big Brother personality, but by an aimless bureaucracy. The private sector is controlled by central services, and the public sector is controlled by the Ministry of Information. Both institutions are totally unreliable and create more problems than they solve. Technicians are constantly late, the infrastructure is always falling apart, innocent people are arrested by mistake, and you are constantly shuffled from one ministry to the next with no hope of getting any answers. It's brilliantly set up at the beginning of the film that both institutions feed off of each other socially and economically. Central Services is always cleaning up the ministry's messes, and the Ministry of Information is funded by the taxes they collect from central services. It's a symbiotic relationship that produces nothing but incompetence. But the funny thing is, nobody seems to notice just how crazy this world is. Even the constant terrorist bombings have become a simple inconvenience. Everyone has become immune to the madness, except for the main character Sam Lowry, who desperately wants to escape the prison that is Brazil. Even though Terry Gilliam has always said that he has never read 1984 or seen any of its film adaptations, the two films have some surprising similarities. In both films we get romantic love stories, we have characters who are revolutionaries, all of the food is inedible, but what's most interesting is that both films show the hero's dreams and fantasies. Winston and Sam each have fantasies that they retreat to, where they feel free to be who they want to be, and coincidentally, each man's fantasy gets slowly taken over by the state. There's a saying that the Nazi Gestapo broke bones, but the East German Stasi broke souls. Breaking one's soul is shown in each film and demonstrates the biggest threat to any totalitarian government. It isn't war or domestic terrorism, but a compassionate, free-thinking mind. Tragically, to make this point clear, both films show our heroes' minds and spirits broken. These are definitely not fun films to watch, but they both serve a purpose. They warn the audience just how easy it is to slip into madness and lose your humanity. That we're all capable of doing terrible things to each other out of fear. They challenge you to be humane.